Hey guys, so for this video, I am going to be doing a movie review of Exorcist The Believer. The Exorcist Believer. Not that it really matters what order, but yeah. I'm not really the biggest fan of the Exorcist series, but I thought why not just go and watch this one. Maybe I'll be surprised. And yeah, I mean, I'll just go into the plot for the movie. So this movie, it follows Victor Fielding. He is a photographer who is living in Haiti with his pregnant wife. You know, they're living up the life. Everything is great. They're going to beaches. They're eating the best foods. They're getting blessed by voodoo priestesses. But yeah, there is an earthquake, and his wife does get injured. And he has to make a decision between saving his wife's life and saving the life of his unborn child. So yeah, flash to 13 years later, and Victor has raised his daughter, and so they appear to have an alright relationship. Angela has to sneak into his room to get some of her mother's possessions. So it's kind of, you already get the sense of him trying to, avoid having to deal with the death of his wife. And you don't kind of notice how he seems to be very overprotective of her. But one day, Angela goes into the woods with her friend, who is the daughter of, I believe it's a Baptist priest. And they decide that they're going to do a seance to try to contact Angela's mother. And yeah, it's just a continuing trend of horror movies of kids just deciding to use a Ouija board. But I mean, I guess technically they are trying to contact someone from the dead, so it doesn't feel like it's just randomly deciding to play with the Ouija board. So, but yeah, they end up disappearing, and the parents go search for him, and they end up finding them after about 3 days with burns on their feet. The girls, they don't remember anything that happened. They don't even realize it's been 3 days since they disappeared. They think it's only been a few hours. But they seem to be not too bothered by it. The parents, they just decide, hey, let's take you home. And yeah, they get home, and Angela ends up attacking her father, and Catherine ends up having an episode in church. And Angela gets taken to the hospital again, where she is being cared for by her nurse. And we get this entire episode where, Angela starts bleeding in, some unmentionable place. And so it kind of freaks the nurse out, of course. Catherine's mother, she believes that the girl had gone to hell and had brought something back with them. And so they go, Victor and his daughter Angela, they are going home. Or I think it was just Victor, because he's coming home from the hospital, and Anne, she's there because she happens to also be the neighbor of his. She believes the girls are possessed because Angela knows that Anne was going to be a nun when she was younger, and she ultimately left the church after she had gotten pregnant and gotten an abortion. And so, because possessed Angela knew that, she believes that she's being possessed by a demon. So she's trying to talk to Victor to try to, I guess, help him see reason, if you will. He doesn't want to listen to her because, it comes off as he's like an atheist, but in reality he's just mad at God. It's that whole spiel of, something bad happens to me, and so I'm now mad at God. It's not necessarily that you don't believe God exists. And so she gives him a book, and it's the book that Regan's mother had written about her experience. And so she gives it to him so that he'll read it. So Chris, Regan's mother, has spent I'm assuming since it happened, he spent all the time researching, researching exorcisms and stuff like that from all over the world, all different cultures, and has made it into this book. And ultimately, the success of this book has resulted in a rift between her and Regan. And so, yeah, Regan ends up disappearing. The father finds Chris and, asks her to see Angela. And so, I guess she's okay with it. And so he takes her to Catherine's house, one of the possessed friend of Angela's, and leaves her there. She goes up into Catherine's room, and Catherine, after Chris tries to exorcise her, she takes a cross and stabs Chris in the eyes with them and blinding her. This is, I'm not sure what the father, Victor, Angela's father, was expecting. Did he leave her there expecting her to go up into the room and try an exorcism? Did he just leave her there to go do something else and, she decided to wander up there? And so, yeah, that was kind of iffy for me. But yeah, in the hospital, Victor goes to see Chris, and she says to get people together from all faiths to perform an exorcism. And so, apparently, this is called a excumenical, I can't say that, exorcism. Apparently, it's actually a thing where you bring together people of different, what's the word? Just different sects of religion, I guess. Different sects of Catholicism, because one of them is a root doctor, or a root work doctor, which apparently kind of combines elements of Catholicism with more like African traditions used by African slaves. And so I'm assuming that's kind of what it is. It's different kinds of Catholicism. But anyways, so they get together, the Exorcist Dream Team. There's Catherine's parents, Catherine's family pastor. There is a Pentecostal preacher and a root work healer, like I said. But the Catholic Church refuses to allow their priest to get involved because they feel the girls are suffering from a psychological disorder, even though no one actually went to go check on the girls. And so I don't know how they know that they're suffering a psychological disorder. It just feels like they just don't want to be involved, maybe because of what happened to the first one. But during the exorcism, it is revealed that Victor did not actually choose Angela when deciding whether or not to save his wife or his unborn daughter. He chose his wife, and she happened to die, and Angela lived. And so we kind of get that. I guess you could say that's kind of the rift between them. He probably feels guilt over the fact that he chose the wife over his unborn daughter, and probably cares, eventually grows to care about her. And so now he's having that, it's kind of like that distance between them, why he's like, trying to, unwilling to allow her to have like access to his wife's things or her mother's things, and just his overprotectiveness of her. It's just this unconscious or maybe conscious knowledge that he did, he didn't choose her, I guess. But the demon, the demon tells them that they have to choose which of the girl dies, but Victor and Catherine's mother refuse to choose. The Catholic priest decides to try to help, but then gets his neck snapped right away, so he wasn't very much use. Of course, Victor suddenly regains his faith and starts reciting the Lord's Prayer. Yeah, so once again, he didn't lose his faith, he was just mad at God. Victor apologizes to his daughter and, tries to give her mother's scarf back to make her stronger. I'm assuming that's kind of supposed to be like a parallel to the beginning where she had to sneak in to get the scarf in the first place, which she ultimately was getting to try to, contact her mother. But now that they're referencing here, I'm assuming that's kind of the connection, that he's willing to give it to her now. But yeah, so Tony does end up choosing Catherine. And so the demon reveals that because Tony chooses Catherine, she is the one who's going to die, and Angela ends up surviving. So I'm assuming that's what he meant by they have to choose, because you literally have to say, I choose, in this case, Catherine. Did Tony, the father, know that him choosing Catherine was going to kill her? Or was he just an idiot? Or was this literally just kind of, he misunderstood what the demon was trying to get him to do? He didn't realize that saying that you choose him actually meant that you're going to choose to have him die, as opposed to choosing to save them. I don't know. It's kind of confusing, I guess. But yeah, after that, after, that finally happened, the police conveniently come just as it's ending, and it just lets all of them go. And so, despite the fact there's actually a dead body and there's like evidence of an exorcism, nobody gets arrested or questions, anything like that. It seemed very much just, go on your way. And then, at the end, we see Regan reunited with her mother in the hospital. Which, that particular scene, I was just waiting for something terrible to happen, because we see Chris, she's kind of like looking outside the hospital room, or hospital window, which obviously she's not actually looking. But we see her from behind as she's looking, pointing out the, her sights out the window, and you're just waiting for something terrible to happen, and then, the woman shows up, and you kind of suspect that it's Regan, and so it's, it's confirmed, and then they hug, but I was still kind of waiting for something terrible to happen, just because of the way it was shot, and of course, it's a horror movie, so, but anyways, so my thoughts on the movie, it was nothing mind-blowing. It did reference parts, of the original, obviously Chris and Regan being the biggest parts. The acting was nothing special. It was just kind of, mediocre, but again, the script wasn't that particularly impressive. So, they didn't really have much to work with. I did like how we kind of gotten some consequence at the end. These girls, they did this. They contacted the dead, I guess, and both get possessed, and it's not just happily tied up in a bow by the end. One of them do end up dying because of it, and it was the girl who, I think that she was probably had the most distance between her parents. It didn't feel like they had such a close bond as the other two, and I do feel like the Victor and his daughter, they were able to kind of come to terms with what happened, and I guess you could say forgive each other, whereas Catherine and her parents felt like they just had too much of a distance, and it ultimately ends up resulting in Catherine dying. So that's kind of something I was having during the movie. Comparing it to the original was more atmospheric, which added to the dread, like the scene where the priest arrives, the whole fog, and then, him being lit by the street lamp. So, That gave it a lot more atmosphere. I don't really remember any real striking scenes from this movie, so that was kind of a disappointment. I guess you could say the original movie felt like it had passion behind it, unlike this one, which pretty much just felt like paint by numbers horror movie. In the original, we get Regan using the Ouija board. I think in this one she kind of was using it just for fun, and then we slowly start getting her possessed. Kind of that slow dread, I guess you could say. Whereas in this one, they did the Séance, and then immediately possessed. It happened so quickly, and of course, something else that bothered me is the whole involvement with the Catholic Church. Which, I mean, in the first one, they came relatively quickly after thinking into possession, but now they're just going to claim that it's a disorder. Again, it just felt either that they just didn't want to actually have to involve the Catholic Church in this movie. Maybe they're trying to differentiate it from, the first movie, or the Catholic Church didn't want anything to do with this because of what happened to the first one. So I don't know, but it's kind of what I got from this movie. Of course, most of the actors I don't know anything about, but of course, Linda Blair and Ellen Broslin, I don't know, return as Regan and Chris, and the movie was directed by David Gordon Green. He's the one who actually did the recent Halloween series, which I did not know about. Peter Sadler did the screenplay for this movie, but this is one of the only movies that he has on his resume. The other was Camp X-Ray, which was nominated at Sundance, and I don't know why he was given this screenplay to write, because like I said, he really doesn't have anything at all on the screenplay other than Camp X-Ray, which I will admit I haven't seen that, but usually don't see when a movie's this big, you have people who haven't really done any movies actually being allowed to write it. So I don't know. But the story itself was by Scott Teems. He did Halloween Kills, Firestarter, and he also did Insidious: The Red Door. And so I still like Insidious: The Red Door more. It had more scares, I feel. And the story itself wasn't as good as the others in the Insidious series, but I still enjoyed that one more than I did this one. So Danny McBride, you guessed it, Danny McBride, who does a lot of the comedy movies, he's also one of the writers on the Halloween movies. Surprisingly enough, he acted in Pineapple Express, which this director also directed, so it kind of understand why they would be in contact with each other, because they have worked together before. But I just don't think of horror when I think of Danny McBride. Cinematographer, Michael Simmons, director, a photographer for the Halloween movies. So most of the people involved in this movie were also involved in the Halloween movie, which the first one made around 159 million, and the other two made less. So the production for this movie, it started in August 2020, when it was reported that Morgan Creek Entertainment would be producing a new installment in the Exorcist franchise. Of course, the people involved said that they would never attempt to remake The Exorcist, but they would obtain the blessings from the original creators before they moved forward with any new entries. Blumhouse Productions got involved, and Universal released the film, and Universal collaborated with Peacock for potential 2 sequels being made to be on Peacock exclusively, Peacock streaming exclusively. So I'm not sure how that's, if they're going to continue on with that. Green, the director, and McBride's Rough House Pictures also was involved. I didn't realize that they had a production company, so that was interesting. So the reception for this movie, it made $108.5 million on a $30 million budget, with Universal spending $400 million to get the rights. So, I mean, I guess you could say this is a failure, or they didn't automatically make money with this one because Universal spent $400 million on the rights. But still, you had to have known it's a horror movie for one. And considering the previous like horror Halloween franchise, it made what, 150 million, and then slowly made less. You gotta think that they know that this probably isn't going to make them a ton of money from the get-go. So I'm not sure if they're gonna try to can this future plans because they don't automatically make a lot of money. But yeah, just the way that, you know, studios are dumbasses right now. I wouldn't be surprised if they can this. So the film made $11 million in its second weekend, finishing second behind newcomer Taylor Swift's Eras tour. And that just reminded me that this was probably the worst theater experience I've ever had. Not necessarily when it came to watching the movie. I think there were kids as well in there, or teenagers, that were being annoying as shit. Maybe it was another movie, but still. Just actually being in the theater was hell. I should have realized, one, that it was going to be hell when I looked on I was going online to book the ticket, and I looked at the showings for the Taylor Swift concert, whatever, and they had showings every 15 minutes, literally. It had like half a page of showings for Taylor Swift on the same exact night. That should have clued me in. It should have clued me in when I got to the theater, the parking lot, and had to park halfway to the back because there were so many cars there. But it was a Friday night, so I didn't really think much of it. But being in the lobby, it was literal hell. I had to go straight to the movie theater because I could not get any food, any, concessions, because the line was like all the way to the door, and so it probably spent like 30 minutes to an hour waiting for food. And so I just went to the theater, and then halfway through the movie I got up to get the concessions, and it was again halfway to, like all the way to the door. And I was like, I was pissed. And then I got even more pissed because I remembered that I can actually just order it online and go pick it up. And my dumb ass didn't realize that. But yeah, it was a nightmare. So back to the movie. Rotten Tomatoes, 22% of the 232 critics that reviewed it were positive, with an average rating of 4.4 out of 10. And a consensus spread that The Exorcist believer earns points for trying to take a franchise back to its terrifying roots, but a lack of new ideas and screams makes this an inauspicious start to a planned new trilogy. Which I couldn't help, of course, but take shots at Rotten Tomatoes and, point out how they really don't care about lack of creativity based on, some of the best rated movies on their sites are complete dog shit because they happen to be in popular franchises, so critics, they really just go based on popularity, so I don't really get as much credence. Owen Gleberman, writing for Variety, said in his review, The Exorcist believer in its superficially competent and poshly mounted way feels about as dangerous as a crucifix dipped in the bottle of designer water. And this review just reminded me of why I hate critics. Because they will literally just give you word salad to say something like, hey, this wasn't very creative. So reading reviews from critics makes me, my brain melt because of how, what's the word, pompous they sound whenever they review a movie. And Plugged In, Paul Essay praises the movie for its theme of emphasizing the importance of faith and community in rescuing the oppressed. And I will say I enjoyed the aspect of having, like, not just Catholicism, they also have, like, different faiths working together, and we get these different kinds of, like, exorcisms, because I'm assuming that's how, like, all these religions in the movie, those are the kind of exorcisms, those are what exorcisms are like in their religion. So, for example, the beetroot, the root, whatever it's called, the healer, there was a scene where she, I'm not sure if she threw anything into the fire, but when they were doing the exorcism, something was coming out, like a smoke was coming out of the girls, and then, we get smoke coming out of the fire, and they kind of combine, and they look like they're fighting. So I'm assuming that's how an exorcism in that religion was supposed to happen. So it was kind of interesting to see all the different, religions and how they do exorcisms. So that was interesting to me. So John Melderig of the Catholic Review noted the original picture, the original Exorcist, was a fairly straightforward confrontation between Regan's tormentor and the two Catholic priests. Driving away the devil here, by contrast, takes on the qualities of a circus, thus promoting a synchronist, humanistic, and even vaguely anti-Catholic outlook that could be spiritually damaging for anyone inclined to take it seriously. On the whole, however, this half a century later follow-up is best dismissed as chaotic schlock. Of course he wouldn't, he would think it's anti-Catholic because in the movie the Catholics don't do shit. But let's just say my opinion on the Catholic Church is very, very low, so anybody who tries to, I guess, appear high or mighty, any Catholic person that tries to be high and mighty, just, you don't have any, like, leg to stand on. Ollie Richards of Empire felt differently about the actress who played Chris's role in the movie. The role feels gimmicky rather than essential and sets the film on a cheesier path of callbacks, winks, and attempts to one-up the original. It becomes a tribute act, its own personality striking in the shadow of a classic. But that's the thing, isn't it? The actress for this movie, or for the first one, Chris, the actress who plays Chris, refused to be in the second one, but she decided to be in this one. So, her involvement, I guess you could complain about her involvement in this one, but I'm assuming that her involvement in this one, she agreed with the script for this one. So, can you really complain about what was in this movie or her role in the movie, when this is probably what the actress wanted to actually come back to be on this movie? So, and then in July 2021, 2 sequels were confirmed to be in development, with the same creative team of Green, McBride, Sudler, and teams on board. The first of these sequels, Exorcist Deceiver, will be released in theaters on April 18th, 2025. After the poor reception of Believer, sources from The Hollywood Reporter claimed that almost certainly by some degree of creative rethink for the next two films. There will almost certainly be some degree of rethink for the first two films, and Green recently expressed some doubt about his participation, which, why are they suddenly caring about what the reception for this movie is going to be? Did they really think that people are not going to like it? It's literally a sequel to a popular classic. And if you're already planning two sequels, why the fuck are you suddenly getting cold feet now? This is just what makes me so goddamn mad. You know, get these creators and studios, you know, maybe studios is influencing, you know, some of the decisions, but still. They will take a popular movie or a cult classic, they will make another movie based off of it, and then suddenly act surprised because some people don't like it, when yes, not everyone's gonna fucking like, you know, these, you know, remakes. So you're either going to have to go in knowing that and planning for that, or you're just delusional. It just makes me so irritating. I mean, look at the Halloween movies. The first one did, what, 150, like I said, and the next two drastically dropped. So why do you suddenly think this movie is going to be much different? It just feels so fucking irritating. I mean, I guess you could say the reason why Halloween series is more popular is because it has one central icon, Michael Myers. Whereas this one, I think there wasn't really an icon. You know, the demon, I guess, was really just a demon. It didn't really have its own identity. It was a demon possessing Regan, and so, you know, it's not as iconic, it's not as memorable like Michael Myers is, and that's why this wasn't as successful as, say, the Halloween movie. But still, why didn't you think that, you know, you didn't think this is possibly going to happen, that people might not like it, and instead of just going full out, if you believe in this, you know, story, then instead just, you know, just drop it or change it. So, yeah, it's just irritating to me. That's why I just now, I can't really find anything to enjoy from modern media, because quite often whenever we get something like a franchise, or like something new, something original, quite often than not, they will pretty much screw it up, because they automatically take any negativity as evidence of failure, and instead of just going through with it and then letting us see, you know, come to our own conclusion by the end of the, you know, the series, the franchise, whatever, they just stop before they even begin. This is why I'm so fucking thankful that Lord of the Rings and I guess the original Star Wars, they just completed it all. Or specifically Lord of the Rings, because they released it one after the other. They filmed the entire thing and then released it, you know, 3 years, I think, over 3 years. And so they didn't have to worry about possible, you know, studio interference. I mean, we already know that they had, you know, Peter Jackson had, you know, problems with the studio, but at least we could now enjoy the series, or this, you know, the Lord of the Rings, without worrying about, you know, studios fucking it up because of audience reaction. So, but yeah, I kind of got on a tyrant there, but still. But yeah, this was a pretty mediocre movie. I'll just leave it with that. So, but if you want just a not too scary, but of course, for me, you know, very few things scare me, so some people might find this scary, but still. If you want to go watch a scary movie, just go watch this one. But yeah, so that was my review of The Exorcist Believer. So if you did like this video, get a like, subscribe to get notifications for all the videos I'll be doing. You guys have a nice night, stay safe out there, and talk to you later.